recording, it is purely for those who have attended, because we don't want to put this online, especially if people are wanting to share something that is quite special. And also to allow this space to be where if you want to be vulnerable or if you want to take that step and share something, that we as a community are here to support you through that as well. No judgment, no fear. So today we've got a really interesting topic, and the topic is freeing ourselves from suffering, because of course in the Buddhist teachings, the Buddha talks a lot about suffering, the cause of suffering, the possibility to be free from suffering, and the path leading to that freedom from suffering. So I would like to invite David for our intro talk. What is suffering? How do we free from it? And what are some tips for us, David?
Thanks, Tina, for that lovely introduction. I think the best way for me to introduce is just to give my own personal experience of suffering a little bit, and invite other people to consider bringing their suffering to our meeting tonight. And this is a very welcome gift that you give to yourself and to the group, because it's extraordinary what can happen. I just want to tell a story which some of you would have witnessed. When on the first session I was talking about my challenges I had with my daughter, and she decided basically to disown me, and that caused me a lot of suffering and heartache, and the experience of just in this group to share that in a place of honesty and vulnerability was wonderful, because I was really heard, and everyone was so kind in their understanding. It didn't take any sides, and it was a real experience of healing for me. And about a week after I shared that, I had a wonderful dream where I was expressing my love for my daughter in a very tender way, and she was open to it. So in the dream, I experienced a sort of inner connection with my daughter, which was wonderful. And it all arose out of my willingness to take the risk of owning and sharing my suffering, because just to do it in our own mind doesn't seem to be enough. It seems to want to be out there. So I invite you all to have a close look and be honest about what your things are, and be willing to jump in and share with us. And you never know what's going to happen as a result of that. As Tina said, the Buddhist path, basically the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, relate to the reality of suffering and finding a way out of it, and the prescriptions for that. My approach is not so prescriptive. It's more looking deeply at who and what is it that suffers in us, and how can we free ourselves of that identification with what I would call the ego self, or the separate self that sees itself as limited and in danger and having to protect itself. So yeah, so it's really a matter of looking at the source of the suffering, looking at what's led to it, and then gradually we can begin to find our way out of it. Or we can go the direct path, which is to recognize that fundamentally all suffering is a sense of lack, and ultimately a fear of death. And we all have our share of that. And the direct path looks at what is the source of freedom, happiness in our life, and how can we live from that. And but of course there's lots of sort of pathways that lead to the garden. They're all different pathways, but ultimately the garden is one garden, the garden of our true self, which is where we want to come from. So what I like to do is to throw it back to Tina, because she's wonderful at devising these questions that we can ask. And we might be, a good place to start would be for you to put something in the chat about what it is that you would label as suffering at the moment, and how we can look more deeply at that. Tina, would you like to take it from there?
Yeah, thanks, David. Well, I think that's a great question. So I invite everyone in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and you can share with us as well. And again, don't need a whole essay, just something that you would like to share. What are some things or thing that may be on your mind or in your heart that is causing suffering for you? So you can just pop that into the chat. Okay. Yes, Frank, and feel free to unmute yourself, Frank, if you'd like to share. And while that's happening, others, if you wish, you can put that into the chat as well. So Frank, you just have to unmute yourself so we can hear you. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks for that. I have a short question.
Okay.
I have a great respect for you, Tina, and for David, because you are much smarter and more intelligent than I am. And the question is, I don't have much education, but I've been a Buddhist more than 50 years, and I think I was a good Buddhist. Never gave up learning. The question is, what's the difference between pain and suffering?
Yeah, good question. And I don't see in any way that that is a question that rises from the, you're not as smart as what David or myself are, not at all. We're all equals here. So David, what's the difference between pain and suffering?
Yeah, it's a good question, Frank, because it's an important distinction. But pain is a signal from the body and to the deeper self that something needs attention. So, for example, if we injure ourselves, then we have to take care of that part of the body and do something to help out. And similarly, if we're, if we have emotional pain for whatever reason, then it's a signal that things are not in balance and we need to look deeper. So there is a link between pain and suffering. And there's also a difference in the sense that for some people, they have chronic pain and they've tried everything. They've been to pain clinics, they've had all sorts of approaches, and they still find that they can't get rid of the pain. And this is a real challenge, how to live with chronic suffering, and how do we soldier on, and how do we find sort of peace in the midst of that type of chaos. So we can see pain as our friend in the sense that it's alerting us to something that we need to pay attention to and remove the splinter. But at the same time, it can be a deep path to a real equanimity if we have to deal with chronic suffering. But people who are in chronic pain have my deepest compassion. Thanks for the question, Frank.
Great answer. Thanks, David. Frank, I'm reminded that there is a story from the Buddha. In one of the suttas, he talks, I don't know if you've heard of the simile of the arrow. Have you heard of the simile of the arrow? Yeah, so just for those who've never heard of this simile before, very briefly. So if someone gets shot by the arrow, the first, now there's two similes that they use. One is like, they start asking, where did this arrow come from, blah, blah, blah. I'm not talking about that story. I'm talking about another story where you get hit by the arrow the first time, right? And that's like that pain. That's like the pain that comes from birth. So the moment you're born, inevitably there would be old age, sickness and death, right? There will be these kind of worldly pains that will come through. Yes. But what often happens is, when people are shot with that first arrow, we keep shooting ourselves with the second arrow and possibly the third and the fourth and up until infinity, right? And that's the suffering. So what I mean by that is sometimes we have body aches and body pains, and that is that first arrow. It's hard to really run away from that because that's the natural condition of the body. But what then happens, there's the mental suffering that comes from it. There is the, oh, poor me, oh no, and then there's the fear, and then there is the aversion that comes from all of that. So that's like the second arrow. And you can apply that analogy of the two arrows in different aspects of suffering, whether it's physical suffering, mental suffering, suffering that arises from what happens in your life, the events that occur, emotional suffering, all of that. So I hope that helps, Frank.
I think you're a very wise and very good teacher, Tina, because
that's a Buddha. I don't take no credit for that. So
I
don't
think
hit ourselves with the second arrow. That's the point.
I think what I know personally, it's not my own invention. I learned it from the Buddha and from the Dhamma, but that's the correct answer. But I would add just one more thing. I don't want to say I'm too smart. Just one thing, mindfulness. Like you have a good toothache. Oh, what comes up first? Anger and rejecting, aversion. And when that aversion comes for the pain, it's slowly becoming suffering. But when the pain comes up, you say, oh, pain is just a feeling. Everything passes away.
Yeah.
And you try to live with it, especially when you meditate and you have pain in the knee. If you do not accept it, that's suffering. If you accept it, the pain is just a feeling and it goes on and on. And if I may have just one more minute.
Sure.
My favorite teacher was Aya Kema. When she became Aya Kema, before that she was Ilse Ledemann, a lovely German Jewish lady. And we used to go and study with Prakantipalo. So on one of the courses at What Buddha Dhamma Wise Men Spirit, she gave us just a sign, a piece of paper, and it said, do not blame the trigger. Meaning, when you have pain or some dissatisfaction or whatever, if you're married, you blame the partner. If you don't get, I'm talking about sex or whatever, you blame the partner for that. If you don't get enough wages, you blame the government, whatever. But the blame, this blame covers up the dukkha. And one day I said, dear old Aya Kema, she passed away, but I'm going to do for 2 months what she said. Do not blame the trigger, Frank. So I just looked at the pain, the dissatisfaction, whatever physical or mental pain came, 1 month, and then another month. And you know what? I became happy. Because I realized that this is it. The underlying law of nature is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, pain. But when you blame something else outside of you, then you never learn. So, finally, when I realized that I'm suffering and I have pain, I became happy.
Exactly. Yay. That's the second arrow. That's what you're identifying, isn't it?
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
That's the second arrow. We just have to stop shooting ourselves with that second arrow. The first one, okay, it comes, you accept it, and then you leave it. Now, it seems like we've got some experienced meditators and Dhamma practitioners in this group. I'm just going to pop something into the chat.
Okay.
And it's a question. Okay, and I'm going to reveal the answer at the end. Okay, I guess this is my way to make sure you guys all stay at the end for the answer. So the question is pain nama, which is mental, or is it rupa, which is physical? Okay, so don't tell me now, think about that, and then we'll come back to it at the end. But we've got some really good answers to our earlier question, okay, in terms of suffering. So let's take some time to go through those. So we've got Daisy. Thanks, Daisy, for starting off that chat. I really appreciate the first person who answers. I really, really do, because it's usually that first one. And then the whole conversation can continue from there. And as we're talking and going through some of these answers, all those who haven't responded, feel free to put some of your thoughts in the chat as well. Okay, so Daisy's answer is letting go of injustice when I see it. Okay, now injustice is definitely a theme that as a lawyer I deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I have some things to say about that. But before I do want to hear David's thoughts about this. So the suffering that comes from injustice. What do you think, Dave?
Well, I really think this is your question, Tina, but I'll give you my version of it. I think that injustice is a part of life, and it's always something that is a trigger for us, because you know, we can't just pretend it's not happening. We feel compelled to do something about it, and because it's an aspect of life, it's part of the, if you like, the ignorance side of life. It's the opposite side of Buddha nature, but it's also included within the patterns of life. So injustice, whatever we want to say about it, is something that exists. So what's a wise and wholesome way of dealing with it? And basically, you know, I would like to throw that to Tina, but I think that the important thing is to recognize judgment as something that we need to have a very wise relationship with, because the degree to which we have sort of righteous indignation about somebody and label it as injustice is not always seeing things accurately. We have to ask ourselves, are we sure? And recognize the pointing finger, that for one finger pointing at the injustice, there are three fingers pointing back at me, because this may be, well, something that I'm judging within myself that I haven't seen. So it's a multifaceted arena. And Tina, your specialty, away you go.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, David. So views, isn't it? Right. So when we have that sense of injustice, is because there is a particular view as to how we see the situation and how what we think would be just, right? And having been a lawyer for over a decade, I can tell you that as much as the courts try to deliver justice and be seen as delivering justice, but unfortunately, injustice does happen. And unfortunately, also, a lot of times in life, people suffer and they have things that happen to them that really the justice system can't deal with, right? I can give you many examples, but I won't, because it will take up a lot of time. But that sense of, there are some things that have hurt us, but it's not breaking the law. So no one will come and be able to heal us. The only way we can heal is by healing ourselves, right? So for example, you know, your partner cheats on you. That's really awful, right? But it's not something that you could really complain to the courts about, okay? So there is a difference between justice and something else. So I remember once a barrister talking to me, because he knows that I'm a Buddhist lawyer, and he was interested, and he's Catholic himself. So we were just talking about this. And one of the things that came up was justice. And he asked me whether or not I still believe in justice. And my answer to him is, I don't believe in justice, but what I do believe in is karma. And there is a difference between the two. Because there are times when we may do our best to try and get all the evidence and present the truth and find the truth and deliver justice. And many times the courts are able to deliver justice and we are able to assist in that way. But there are many, many times when we can't. But I do believe in karma. And having seen a lot of cases where maybe someone isn't able to have justice in the court system, but they are able to find karma in another way. And I'm reminded that there is a really nice story from Ajahn Brahm. So Ajahn Brahm, he used to go to the prisons to teach a lot of prisoners. So he got to know a lot of the prisoners as well. And there was a prisoner who came up to him and he said to Ajahn Brahm that actually he is in jail for a crime he didn't commit. And he really means that. When you think about that, you'll think, wow, that's real injustice, isn't it? But then he said, so that robbery that they said that I had committed, I didn't do that robbery. So I am in here for a crime I did not commit. But I did do other robberies that they didn't actually catch me for.
Yeah.
So there you go. So not necessarily justice, but certainly karma has caught up. So so sometimes when we look at some things that we think that there is injustice, just remember that Karma is going to level everything out. You don't need to do anything. And another really good Ajahn Brahm quote, which is, don't worry about it. Karma will get the bastards anyway. So Daisy, don't worry about it, okay? Karma will work itself. It's the natural law. Whether or not you believe in karma, just like gravity, you don't have to believe in it for you to stay put on the ground. It will happen. And we don't know what's happened in the past as well to create what conditions are here today. So make peace with whatever comes. Hope that helps you, Daisy. Okay, next question. Meredith, an inability to help others. This is great. And particularly great, Meredith, because knowing you want to help the whole world. So seeing other people suffer can cause a lot of suffering for ourselves as well. So David, what can we do with this one?
Yeah, that's a really, I think you've summed up Meredith pretty well. Wonderful the way she's such a helpful person, but it has a challenge to it, doesn't it, to Meredith, in that we can identify with the helper. We can become sort of somebody who really suffers because people are suffering and we can't respond. And so we feel, our sense of suffering is that we carry too much. And so we have to, if we're going to be really helpful to people, we also have to know how to see the oneness that sort of underlies all of life. In other words, we're in this together, so that your suffering is also my suffering. But at the same time, it's not personal. It has an impersonal quality to it. And suffering is part of life. It exists. And it has an incredible capacity. Suffering can make us move in directions which are very, very powerfully healing and positive for the world. So to eliminate suffering is a fantasy that's not going to happen. It's working wisely with suffering and knowing what we can and can't do, and to see where it fits in. So we don't have to think that we're powerful enough as individuals to fix all the suffering in the world. So we have to really start to identify that as an aspect of ourselves that we can begin to unhook from. And we're actually more helpful to people when we also realize, for example, with our children, that they suffer in all sorts of ways. And if we were to deprive them of that suffering, they wouldn't be growing up. So that we can feel compassion, but at the same time, allow the space for a solution to arise just by being present and in caring and being compassionate. We don't have to come up with the answer, but having that attitude is very inspiring. And sort of it's saying to the person, yes, we do suffer and it's difficult for us. And to hold that space is something that allows a new possibility to arise. What do you think, Tina?
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
So in my meeting room at my office, there is a really beautiful picture of Guan Yin. And it's a picture of her, and she's got all her ears where she can hear all the cries of the world. And then there is also her holding, right, just a ball. So it's kind of like her holding all the suffering. But what happens is, as David says, we can hold other people's suffering together with them and work through it with them. Whereas what sometimes happens, and David touched on this, is we become the fixer, right? And we identify ourselves as the fixer, the person who needs to go out and fix everything, the one who needs to go out and make sure everyone is free from suffering. And when we can't do that because they've got their own karma or they've got their own preconditions, then we suffer. So we're now adding to their suffering, right? So we're suffering because we're seeing their suffering. And if I can just quickly share a story, when I was much younger, I had to be the sole, I was a main person to support somebody else who was going through a lot of suffering, right? And I felt like this huge load on me, right? So if anyone's ever going through that mode of being someone's carer, you know what it's like, such huge suffering. You feel like their whole happiness and their suffering is your responsibility that you need to take care of. So because I was so young, I didn't have the right tools. I myself got myself into a whole heap of suffering because of that. And when we are suffering, we are not at our optimum. We aren't able to help them to the best of our abilities compared to if we were able to take a step back, have that equanimity, and really be able to support them as best as we can. So that whole episode taught me a lot about loving kindness, right? So as Buddhists, we try to have loving kindness for everyone. We love everyone and wanted everyone to be free of suffering. But we also have to remember that we ourselves are sentient beings as well. And that we ourselves need to understand loving kindness is not an detached kind of love. It's actually a type of loving kindness that is with an open hand rather than with a clenched fist. So that changes the way that we can love others, help others, and free them and ourselves from suffering. So Meredith, I hope that works and that helps you, and you can continue to do the incredible work that you do for everyone in such a loving way.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, David.
Okay. Lakshmi, the thought of old age and dependency on others for my well-being, that is suffering, right? And the Buddha said that, right? Old age is suffering. All that comes with old age is suffering. But what can we do about it, David?
Well, that's my wife is in the next room having posed that question on the chat. I'm going to invite her. She's going to kill me later to unmute herself. And I love listening to her voice, and she's so sweet the way she shares herself so generously. So perhaps she can expand on that a little bit. And I'll take a back seat because we've had conversations about this, but it's a hot topic, and throw it open to Tina and the gang to see if what they come up with.
Okay, sounds good. So let's see if Lakshmi can come on.
Oh, hi, can you see me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Yeah, I think I always value independence. Like I don't like having to depend on other people. I try to handle things myself, and you know, and if I can help other people. So in a way that make me feel strong and you know, capable. But then, you know, as I get older, I'm thinking, oh God, you know, it's a very different reality when I get older, because then like I might be physically you know, not strong enough to look after myself, and then I need other people to become dependent, you know, or something totally very uncomfortable for me. And I understand that's natural, like illness and sickness and death is a natural you know, in life, and we all have to face it. I don't think about it all the time. But if you ask me, you know, what would be sort of things that will make me feel uncomfortable, I think that is this, and I don't have to face it now, luckily. But only when I think about it, I think that would be something very challenging.
Yeah.
I know it's all about acceptance. Just accept this part of life, like, you know, just like people when they get sick, if they accept it, they can it's actually they are in better position to heal. But I think, you know, life is bigger than us. Like, even though we try to handle it, like, you know, we still get very vulnerable and yeah, not happy, I imagine. So I think that's my take on it. I'm not saying anything can be done. I'm just saying there's something that if you ask me what would it cause suffering, that was something that come out in my mind. It's not about now, it's about what if in the future. And this is something I cannot control.
So it's more the worry about the future rather than what is actually happening.
Yeah, in a way, I know, like I don't think about it that much because I don't need to face it. But when there's a session about suffering, I think that would be something that would bother me, you know, if I will face a situation
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing. And I
Yeah.
think that probably most of us, if that we're not already thinking about that, one day we'll be worried about that, because all of us, we are generally very capable, very independent. And we
Yeah.
don't really want to be dependent on other people, and we don't want to be burdens on other people.
Exactly.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so totally understand that.
Yeah.
And then it's really interesting when we look a bit deeper into that and why that may be. And as we've already touched on, it could be understanding that we need to accept that this is part of life. And also understanding that this is a fear of the future. So some things that haven't happened yet. So all those are really good tips. The other one as well is to look out for identity, right? Because we like to see ourselves in a particular way. We like to uphold our image in a particular way. And unsurprisingly, most of us prefer to see ourselves as very capable and independent
Strong.
and strong.
Yeah.
And that to us is our qualities that make us the human being that we want ourselves to be.
Yeah.
But then we can look into that as well, right? Especially with our Dharma practice, to start to unravel some of those things, right? Who says that you have to be strong in that way and be completely independent to be considered as strong? You know, it actually takes a lot of strength to ask for help. And especially in our society, where very often people need help, but they don't know or they can't ask for help. And so one of the strengths is actually to be able to ask for help and to accept help. And the other thing as well is seeing that other people taking care of us, we may see it as a burden on other people, but it may be for them that it's not a burden, that it is really a gift that they can now support you and help you.
Oh, that would be nice.
Sorry?
That's nice.
Yeah, well, you know, I was just going to say, don't take it from me. Let's actually ask the person who is relevant to this. So, David, if in the event Lakshmi is going to need your help in the future, do you see her as a burden?
Oh, she's a pain in the backside. Day and night.
Wasn't quite the answer I was looking for, but okay.
No, many things. She's gorgeous, of course. But I think the issue is that, you know, she's married to an older man, right? And if I'm not around, I think it's going to be particularly challenging for Lakshmi. That's why I've encouraged her to sort of jump into the group and start, you know, recognizing that there are people who are really lovely and caring and responsive and who enjoy being there for people. And so that I don't have to feel that, you know, when I disappear, when the body disappears, that she's going to be left all on her own. Because, you know, she comes from a different country and she's a pretty quiet creature, and she doesn't sort of not quite as extrovert as her hubby. So I'm sort of coaxing her to join the group, and I'm really proud of her for asking her question.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Lakshmi, wishing you long life and good health, that if you ever need it, you know who to call on. There's all of us. We'll take turns. Thank you. Okay, now the next one is another suffering. Frank, this is directed to you. And the comment is, don't say anything about your wife. She may hear you. Watch out for that suffering too. Just kidding. Okay, next one is from Gabrielle. So Gabrielle's comment is this: concerns of being the ideal me, especially through being reliant on the mental health psychiatric system. Coming to grips with our true shared self has let me realize my life is a bonus and was never promised to be easy. My personal life is something which can hopefully be used to relieve suffering for all of us, the real me. Interesting. Well, thank you for sharing, Gabrielle. And if you'd like to pop online and share us a bit of context around it, you're most welcome to as well. If you don't want to, that's okay too.
Yeah, I'm happy to share a bit of context. I don't know, it's a bit of a long story. I don't know how to keep it summarized, and I felt even that message there was a bit long already. But,
Okay.
but basically, you know, I just was worried for a while since, you know, teenage years that similar to even what's been said already about being a burden on people, and I thought, oh, I want to be independent, and you know, some things really made me worry about that when I, you know, was quite unwell mentally and in and out of hospital and things like this, and I think after coming out and going, you know, even before I looked into Buddhism, which is only now, you know, a year ago still, so really quite new to it all. But I, you know, was looking into, okay, well, maybe I want to be able to do this all myself, and you know, I think if I can do it myself, it might be a bit more challenging to start with, but hopefully the reward of being self-responsible and independent will be able to give me that confidence to push through even the tough days and things like that. You know, Buddhism's been a really big part of that. You know, when we're talking about non-self or even loving kindness, and it's just really, it's, you know, it's at the point now where I don't depend on, and this is only my story, but I don't depend on any medication or psychiatric help, despite having, you know, what is termed a lifelong condition or anything like that. It's, you know, just coming to grips with my true self, which is all of us, I really believe. It's really helpful with that. You know, it's given me an eye into what actually matters, and those tough days are just a challenge to be learned from now, rather than just a tough day that's going to last forever, because nothing lasts forever.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Gabrielle, for sharing. And I really appreciate this, because I think this is your first time here and opening up in such a deep and vulnerable way. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for it. And also that kind of sharing in terms of what you've gone through, that journey. And it's incredible to hear where you are now. So congratulations and well done. David, any thoughts for our friend here, Gabrielle?
Yes, Gabrielle, I just wanted to say how impressed I am with your sensitivity and the fact that you're now, you know, it seems pretty free of whatever medication and sort of hospital support. That's really something to be at that stage. And I think one of the challenges for people who've been through the mental health system is to begin to unhook from some of the labels that people quite freely sort of dish out, you know, you're this or you're that, and that can become a bit of a box that we get locked into. But I can hear from what you've shared and the way that you've shared that you've managed to free yourself from that, which is wonderful. And like you, I find Buddhism and the understanding and the sort of groups like this to be a real resource, and to be brave enough to do what you do. What you can do is to be a part of the group and to reach out in this way is so protective of our well-being. So basically, I just wanted to affirm how you're doing and keep going. I think it's remarkable. I mean, I don't know the details of your mental suffering, but I can just let you know that you're doing pretty well.
Thanks, David. Ditto, I think.
Yeah, and Gabrielle, I think for once I can directly think that there's one person that you should connect in this group, which is Kainan. Kainan used to help us in our Zoom and meditation session in the Buddhist library. Kainan is here tonight, and Kainan even have his own meditation group that he organized. I think he also have some similar experience as you. So feel free to connect to Kainan. Hey Kainan, do you want to tell them about your meditation session? You could
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'd also say hi Gabrielle, and nice to meet you virtually. And yeah, if you do want to get in touch, I'm very happy to talk and connect. But yeah, just briefly, like I've been running introduction to meditation courses, and I also run a drop-in meditation class, mostly focused on learning the meditation technique, but we also talk Dharma and how meditation fits into life as well. But yeah, that's all I'll say now. But thanks, Meredith.
That's fantastic. Can you pop that into the chat, and maybe others would be interested as well?
Sure, thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Gabrielle, I'm seeing that there's some messages here to you. Lots of thank you for sharing, sending you Metta. If anyone feels like giving him a heart, here you go. Loving kindness heart. That's for you, Gabrielle. Gabrielle, I also do a lot of work with mental health patients in hospitals, as well as a lot of clients who are out in the community as well. And I totally get what you mean when you say you're the real you and who you were in the past. I really get that, because very often when I do meet people at their worst, especially those who are hospitalized, it's like they're a different person. And talking to their family, they even say that, like when they have these episodes, when they are like that, they're not themselves. You know, we often hear that when they're not themselves. And I know a lot of them, when they aren't in those episodes, when they are mentally well, that they are just the most gorgeous people, wonderful, loving, kind, intelligent people. So I really hope you live your best life and that you find the love that you can for yourself. And don't worry about being the ideal you. Like, that doesn't exist. There's no perfect us. All of us have faults. All of us have made mistakes. All of us will continue to make mistakes. And that's okay. That's the human condition. And I think sometimes in our society, when we're always trying to be perfect all the time, it actually creates even more stress on ourselves. So we just have to stop taking ourselves so seriously and just have a bit of fun with ourselves, give ourselves a bit of slack. So big heart to you, Gabrielle. And I hope to see you in our future sessions as well, so you can touch base and let us know how you're going. Okay, now, Kerry, others' projections. So this causes a lot of suffering, doesn't it? Others' projections, framing, blaming of you, my irritation, reaction in response to it, fearing of ensuing conflict, to course correct it, refute the label, not be pigeonholed. Okay, so a lot there, but a lot of it is to do with people's views of us, and the conflict that comes from that, our reactions and our responses. Good one. Okay, David, what do you think about this one?
Yes, that's a very good question, Kerry, and one that a lot of us struggle with. There's a couple of things I'd like to say. Firstly, that it relates also to our sort of not so obvious tendency to be self-critical. And because after all, when people are saying critical things, they might even say it in an edgy sort of a way, they're just words. And, you know, in a way, it's just like the weather. You know, sometimes the weather's bad and we don't sort of fall apart. And so it's a tendency that we have to take things personally because it's pushing out, it's triggering something in us. And that's always very useful to look at what those triggers are, because often we'll find that there's some way in which we're also a bit sensitive about something we haven't quite worked through. So it can be very useful to note our reactions and to be kind and to be compassionate with ourselves, to just recognize that this is something that we're sort of reacting to, and to make a note to ourselves whenever we get a chance to be quiet, to look more deeply at it and to see if this is something that's deeper than the surface, not just somebody throwing projections, but it's touching a particular sensitive spot in me. So yeah, I mean, it's if you're on any sort of committee or any sort of business setting, this sort of stuff goes on in the business world all the time, and I used to have to counsel a lot of casualties who really suffer because of that. And basically, I gave them all the same advice: to recognize that this is an opportunity to unhook from a particular way of viewing ourselves that we cherish. You know, I'd like to see myself as a loving person, and somebody makes some sort of comment to the opposite. Well, if I can let go of that identity of myself as a loving person and just see me as, you know, a series of quarks and gluons and you know, vibrating energy system, I'm not sort of like defining myself in that way, then that projection should just go through me like an arrow going through air. And that's something that I've cultivated over the years, because I've had my share of arrows thrown at me and I've managed to dodge every one of them. Anyway, so I hope that's helpful, Carrie.
That's great. Thank you, David. And so very often we find that when we are hurt by other people's words and criticisms, there's two things. One is it's saying a lot about you, right? So before you even think about the other person, it actually says a lot about ourselves. Why is it that we're getting triggered? Why is it hitting that sensitive spot? What is it about this sensitive spot? And as David said, it's very often because that sensitive spot is something we don't really want to look at, something that haven't really healed, something we haven't been able to resolve within ourselves. So these are really good opportunities for us to better understand ourselves and use this as a training ground for us for growth. The second thing is then, besides looking at ourselves, is of course look at the other person. But we don't look at the other person with blame, but we look at them through the eyes of understanding. So very often why people say harsh things, why they're being critical, is actually because they themselves are suffering. Okay, so really reflect on that. Have you ever met anyone who says nasty things and they're happy in that moment? No. Generally not. Generally in that moment, why they're saying such things is because they themselves are unhappy, whether they're angry, whether they're upset, maybe they're stressed, maybe they're afraid. And so they are then projecting all of that on you. But what then happens is if we're not aware of that, we then take all of that personally, like what David was saying, don't take it so personally. It's actually not about you, it's about them. And we start to realize that so often we're so worried about how other people see us, but actually they're not that worried about how we are. They're more worried about themselves. They're thinking more about themselves and what other people think about themselves. So freeing ourselves from that will free ourselves from a lot of suffering. The other thing that can be very freeing is to free yourself from having to be liked by everyone. And it's very normal for us to want everyone to like us and to be popular, and even in our more quiet kind of ways, but we generally like to have social approval, right? And that is pretty intrinsic in us. Right? Because if you're not approved socially, if you're not part of it, then you're out of it, and that could potentially affect your survival, right? So it's very primal, that kind of need to be part of the group and to be liked. But when we take that to an extreme, it can cause a lot of suffering when we're so attached to other people's views of us, and then having to defend ourselves, having to refute ourselves, having to live up to this image, right? So if you just imagine in your head, you've got an image of yourself in your head and you identify with that image, right? Whether that is, I am a good Buddhist, I am a good person, I am intelligent, I am smart, I am the best, whatever that image may be, and all the identification that comes with it. And every time someone says something that may chip a little bit of that, you get really upset, because that image, you need to maintain that. And you put a lot of effort into maintaining that image. But you know what? That's just an image. That's just something you've made up, like everything else. And that's why that is so fragile. And when you realize that that's fragile, hopefully you won't be so attached to it, because it's just a mirage and it's okay. And you are so much more than that, because that's not real. So I hope that helps you, Kerry. Good luck. And if it doesn't, then just feel free to pop some stuff into the chat. Okay, Daisy, thank you. David and Tina, excellent answers. V, in my view, karma is collective rather than individual. Interesting. I think it's both. David, what do you think?
Well, this is a bit controversial. I think you might find my response, because okay. I don't actually believe in karma, and I'll explain why.
Exactly right.
Karma implies time. In other words, we're going to get our own back in sometime in the future. But at the deepest level, if we're really present in life, if we're really here now, this is it. And the tendency to think that if I've done something bad in the past, I'm going to cop it in the future, or if I've done something good, everything's going to go well, sort of is it projecting the past into the future. If we're really totally present, it has a tendency to dissolve karma instantly if we're really present. The way we look at our past, the way we anticipate the future, can dissolve in presence. And so this is the radical sort of understanding of Buddha nature. And it's something which, of course, can take a lifetime to really sort of really access. But there's such a freedom in knowing that being totally here now is the most wonderful release from the burden of carrying the weight of expectations or fear. So that karma dissolves in that understanding. That's my experience. I know it's not the Buddhist, classical Buddhist path, but that's just my little thing. Other people may want to put their view in. I know you look at it a bit differently, Tina.
Yeah, but that's very interesting as a view. So thanks for sharing that, David. And I know with the practice, not that I'm there yet, but there is also a school of thought that for the practice itself, it may be that you will go beyond karma. There is no longer that attachment to the self and the I. So there's no karma that will stick to that identity. But that's just in my head theoretical because I'm not there yet. So if anyone ever gets there, can you please let us know? That would be great. Thanks very much. Okay, next one. So we've got Daisy. Agree, Meredith is a very happy, helpful lady. Happy and helpful lady. Thank you. Kerry, also wary of codependency and enmeshment. What's the gain motive in helping? Ask where do I start and finish and perhaps where the other begins. Consider whose problem is it really. I think that may be a response to what Lakshmi was saying earlier. So thanks, Kerry, for some of those things for us to reflect on. Okay, Sonja. I struggle with the second arrow. So let's go back to that analogy. When I am triggered by my complex childhood trauma, I take aim at myself and I've got really great aim. My self-sabotage and sense of lack becomes heightened. Any tips? Excellent. Thank you so much, Sonja, for sharing. If you do want to feel to jump on and share a bit more about context, you're welcome to, though that does have a lot of information as well. But because it does seem like it's very personal to you, if you did want to share more, we would love to hear from you as well.
Yes, hi there. Yeah, I just know that, you know, because of my complex past, sometimes I do get triggered by, you know, what happened then, things that, you know, will remind me in present day. And it's not necessarily that I'm going back to the past, but it's almost this unconscious reliving physically without me even kind of wanting it or expecting it or anything. It'll come up. And with that kind of reliving of those feelings or emotions, I then, because of, you know, it's a learned kind of thing, I then start to take, you know, aim at myself. I'm not good enough. I'm not this. There's this, you know, lack of safety, lack of, you know, security, lack of all that kind of stuff, you know, will eat away with me, will eat away at me. And so it's a struggle, and it's real to kind of really talk myself through that. And everything that's been said tonight, like, it resonates, you know, it really does. But it is hard, and it is a little bit of a roller coaster, you know. It's not one of those things that I think is going to go away probably ever, just recede into the background. But yeah, any tips for dealing with that would be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing, Sonja. David.
Yes, Sonia. Is it Sonia or Sonja? Not that it
it's Sonia.
Sonia, okay.
Oh,
Sonia.
sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yes, Sonia, first of all, you know, I can just want to send my compassion to you. I think that's a really particularly difficult struggle for people who've had tough, traumatic childhoods. But But there are ways in which we can begin to release it. And I think the way to do that is to recognize that the complex of childhood trauma and the traumatizing agent, whether it be parents, teachers, whatever the traumatizing agent is a complex that sort of sits together in the psyche. And so whenever the trauma is touched, the triggering person is also activated. So we find ourselves not wanting to, but finding ourselves identifying with both the traumatized one and also the traumatizing one. So it's almost like we can hear the voices of critical people or abusive people replaying, and we're actually re-experiencing and adding to the experience. Now, the moment we recognize this, we can begin to create a space which is just receptive and loving and recognizing that this is a time of really, really important to be gentle with myself and to see the tendency is to get stuck in and beat ourselves up, and that's going to arise. But the moment we recognize it, we see this as part of the traumatic pattern. It's not something personal, it's just that something has been touched and it turns up in this way. And when we see those two sides of the pattern, the traumatized and the traumatizer, we can view them from a more detached place. And then we can call in on, you know, the teachings of the Buddha, the presence of the open heart. And it's an opportunity to do some really wonderful healing. Every time it comes up, it's an opportunity to meet it with our deepest understanding and love. I am suffering. I know I'm suffering, and I deserve to be free of this suffering. And so we bring ourselves the deepest presence that we're capable of. And of course, this is the most challenging thing in the moment when we're triggered. I appreciate that, but it's a lifelong practice, and it just the rewards are just immeasurable. So I would just want to encourage you to keep going with that.
Thank you. That's good.
David, thank you. Yeah, so Sonia, I similarly just empathize with what you've gone through. And in the work that I do, I deal with a lot of people who have struggled with childhood trauma, things that have happened in the past that continues to plague them today. And there are different ways that we can deal with this. So in our Buddhist practice, there's some really, really key meditations. If you haven't tried them, I would highly recommend it. One of them is, of course, loving kindness meditation. Now, with loving kindness, if you ever feel that there is a blockage where you can't send loving kindness to yourself or to another person, then you can switch that practice to forgiveness meditation. So instead of jumping straight into loving kindness, you can use that space to offer forgiveness and ask for forgiveness, because that will release some of the things that needs healing. The other thing as well is you can then move to compassion. So having great compassion as the object of your meditation, then moving from there to having joy as then like sympathetic joy. So anytime when you've done something good in your life, you use that as the object of your reflections. So that brings up the joy within you and also the confidence within you as well. And then you could also use equanimity as the object of your meditation, where you just have that balance of mind. So no matter what happens, you just watch it all with equanimity. And of course, the four of them is the Brahma Viharas, the four immeasurable minds. So you've got loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. And you can use them as objects of meditation. You can use it in your day-to-day life whenever something arises, and you can just pick at these qualities, and they really help break free and just allow you to release. The other thing as well to share, if you do journaling or if you like to do journaling, that can be very helpful too, because it allows you that kind of distance to write down what your thoughts are and leave that. But also writing letters to yourself. If you haven't done that, I would recommend that as a beautiful practice too. So whether you may take that moment to be that child again, you know, and just have that safe space for you to write in the eyes of the child, then you leave that letter and you put that aside. And then at another time you come back and you read that letter, but you read that letter as if it is somebody else, it's not you. And then you write a letter to that child and then you read that letter. So that exercise I find does help a lot of people, because what you're slowly doing is you're slowly taking yourself out of that traumatic experience and seeing it as objectively as possible and most compassionately and lovingly as possible. Because very often, if we hear someone else tell the story of our life, we would not react in the way that we react with ourselves. So what I mean by that is, if someone lived what we went through and they told us, oh, this is what's happened to me in the past, and right now I feel so stupid, I feel so dumb, and I hate myself. Now, what would you say to someone who says that to you? You're more likely to give them a hug and say, no, you're not any of those things. You're strong, you're loving, you're kind. But we don't say that to ourselves when we're going through it, right? So we are so critical of ourselves, and we would say things to ourselves that we would never say to anyone else. So this is just a way for us to develop that loving kindness for ourselves. So you can do it either in meditation, you can do it with journaling, you can do it with writing letters, with reflections, or a combination of all of those. So I hope you will find your release and you can start to heal some of the things that's happened to you in the past.
Thank you, Tina and David. That's great. Thank you.
Okay. All right, lots of thanks and sending metta to Gabrielle. Gabrielle, you're getting a lot of loves here. And Gabrielle, thanks for your comment as well. Thanks, Kynan, for sending your email and details about the meditation. Okay, now we get to Kerry. Kerry says, patience, stuck in their past, no qualities of relating. Yes, agree. Tara Branch has a great meditation talk on this. Seems real, but it is true. Now, real but not eternal truth. I think, Kerry, you may have been saying that in the context of a conversation that I don't now remember what it was. David, do you know what it may be?
Yes, I was going to say, Carrie, would you like to clarify what you meant by that? Yeah, because I had the impression she's talking about the people who were caught in the past with.
Okay, she's unmuted herself. So, Kerry, hi.
Yeah. Hi, how you going? Yeah, that was earlier on with my first question, but it is about that sense of projection where people hold on, like, because we've got to look to with a human development lens, like who we are today is not who we were last week, last month, 5 years ago, but some people will form, you said, like that fixed image, and they've got you they've got you stuck in that pocket. So yeah, and at the moment I'm particularly thinking I've got aged parents 78 and 85, and we're very much there's big rumination and a sentimentality and a visitation always back to the past, but there's also statements that people can do, you always, or you know, you never. It's the extremism of our language as well, because nobody ever, like, there's so much more fluidity in relationships, and our language is very much can either elevate that or it can like shut it down, squash it. And in these last years, particularly with my parents, it wasn't easy. I've come through problematic, like childhood trauma in lots of ways, and it has been a progressive relationship for me of letting go and releasing my parents, you know, from my own images too of those scary monsters they were in the early days, and trying to have that compassion and loving understanding and care, respect for them. And we work on that, but they're, you know, those closest to you know your rawest wounds too, so that they are quite adept at stepping on your sore toe at times. So but there's a lot that you let go and release, but there's at times too when like for the truth of the relationship you can't always keep compromising yourself or putting up and shutting up if we're going to gain an extra depth or a step closer to one another. It's knowing when to play the cards, you know, because a lot of times it's a hand that you're being passed around, but always I suppose valuing the relationship over being right is more important. But there's also too that the truth telling that has to happen in the context of relationships for it to be really meaningful. Otherwise, you are just recycling garbage, and where does that get you at the end of the day? You know, what I suppose it's the valuing. What is it you're truly appreciating or wanting to give space to? You know, the seeds that you want to water in the ground that you've been given. Yeah. And the other things were just in terms of childhood trauma, like I often find a lot of things that for me, it's been very somatic, like stored within the body. It hasn't had words, it hasn't had expression. So sometimes the meditations, and there's particularly fantastic work since COVID, there's been a real boom on the internet with it, but there are amazing series that are really tackling, and I think this is now a global phenomenon. People are actually confronting it probably for the first time in their lives, or will in as we still move through all of these things and start coming back out, and the world starts to try and return to their sense of what they think the new normal is. I think we'll be uncovering more than ever a lot of trauma, and it's how to be receptive and open to receiving that trauma in other people as well. So, you know, you still might be healing it and resolving it for yourself, but it's also probably a wisdom that you can gain in order to be there for another at some point, because I dare say you're going to encounter it.
Thanks for sharing, Kerry. And I know you've got another message here as well about polyvagal theory. You want to share a bit about that? I don't know anything about it.
Okay.
Body does not lie.
Yeah, well, again, it's that sense of what the body, like we are witness, not only just, you know, from here, the third eye, but in the emotions and in your bodily energies. And particularly if things as a smaller person and you're overpowered, or, you know, that there's this heavy suppression or ongoing oppression, your body is a container for that. And what goes in eventually has to come out somewhere. And sometimes it can take us by surprise. It's that trigger, you know, it's this verbal vomit that comes up, and then you beat yourself up afterwards, you know, for it. But in actual fact, it is a gift of compassion that your body's just saying, I can't take anymore. I'm sure there's wisdom, you know, wiser ways of handling it. And that's learning the, you know, the desensitization of that mind. But polyvagal is it's like where the gut or where it travels right up into the brain stem, you know, it goes up and it goes Down. It is a tracking system, but it's learning that there's so much more that they know about it now, and it's actually stronger, or the bigger brain, than the mind brain. And a lot of people, that's what they've got to encounter first, or, you know, learn to develop a new tolerance for, before they can actually get to a place of having, you know, the frontal cortex online all the time that can make good quality decisions, because otherwise it's been so programmed in that it's just reactive and they live to regret it afterwards. But, you know, rather than living with that guilt and shame and blame thing all the time, it's about really learning, okay, well, this is the speed humps that I can put in place to help manage it better, so it comes out gentler and slower and steadier, so it's more manageable for the person.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. David, any comments?
Well, just a comment that I think that Kerry has got a pretty good handle on understanding all that stuff, and I just would see it more as a comment that she's sharing her experience with us.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Just one thing I'd like to say is that at some point we recognise that we're the grown-up in the room, you know, and that we don't have to seek approval, or we don't need the parent or somebody to love us. Maybe they're not capable of that because of their own trauma, and that we can release them, and, you know, we can allow them to be who and what they are. And that's such a liberating moment for us when we really affirm that we do have the goods now, you know, and I can see that in you, so I hope you can too.
Oh, thank you, appreciate that.
Beautiful, thank you. Now over to Rizwan. He's got a question or comment. Suffering by not being able to forgive myself and people I love. Very good. Thanks, Riz, for that. David, thoughts on this one?
Well, I was going to say, I think last time you mentioned that you were going to bring up the topic of forgiveness, Tina, and that's one of your things. Perhaps you'd be the one to answer that.
Oh, thanks for remembering. Yeah, so, and I think I touched on it earlier in terms of forgiveness can be a meditation practice. It could also happen on a day-to-day basis as well. So, but interesting enough, Riz, you're talking more about not being able to forgive yourself and the people you love. So kind of like having a barrier there. What I find with forgiveness practice is it's really a practice, like with meditation practices and any type of exercise, you really have to build up to it. You kind of like have to build up that muscle strength, right? So sometimes it can be hard to forgive something or someone that is big. So we start with the little things just to get us starting to forgive. So what that means is in your day-to-day, whenever there are any opportunities for you to forgive, just do it, right? So if someone cuts in front of you, forgive them, okay? If someone's driving terribly in front of you and makes you slam your brakes, just forgive them, offer your forgiveness. Someone jumps in front of you in a line, you can forgive them. You can tell them also that there is a line, but you can also forgive them. If someone calls you and, you know, has a yell at you, right, for no reason, like if it was just somebody who maybe is a telemarketer or something, forgive them. So you forgive all the little things, the easy ones, and then you start building that habit of forgiving. Because what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is actually letting go, right? So you're learning how to forgive. You're learning how to let go. You're learning how to be Teflon. You know what Teflon is like? Nothing sticks, yeah? So no matter what happens to you, nothing really sticks, and you just let it go. And when someone is upset at you and they are yelling at you and their words don't stick to you, do you know what happens? You don't get upset. They get more upset. Okay, so there's a lot of power in that, right? During the Buddha's time, someone comes over and was yelling at him in front of a lot of people, deliberately trying to put the Buddha down with his words. And the Buddha said, well, let me just ask you, if someone comes to your house and gives you a present and you don't take that present, who keeps that present? Who does that present belong to? Do you know? Does it belong to you or does it belong to the person?
Belong to us.
So if I come to you, Meredith, with a present and you say, I don't want that present, who does that present belong to, you or me?
To the giver.
Yeah, to me, doesn't it? Right? So the Buddha then says, it's like you coming here with your words, your harsh words as a gift. And I don't want it. I don't want it. So the Buddha didn't take it. And those words and all that anger and all that frustration just remains with the other person. So be like Teflon, just let it go, forgive. Now, then you slowly move up to the harder ones. So you can start first with the easy people, the neutral people, the people you like, easier to forgive them. Kids who are cute, right? So the easy ones. Then you build up to the more difficult one. So it may be yourself. So in our day-to-day, if there's something that we do, what is our habitual tendency? So you have to watch that. What is our habit? Is our habit that when I make a mistake that I will put myself down, that I will hold on to it, I will keep reminding myself, I'll keep telling myself I'm stupid. Is that your habit? Because if that's your habit, you need to catch that and watch it. And then you break that habit by forgiveness, right? So if you say to yourself, I am so stupid, your next word should be, but that's okay, I forgive myself. Okay, I forgive myself. I forgive myself. All right, because then what you're doing is you're letting that go. You're letting go of that aversion, that anger, and then you're replacing that with forgiveness and loving kindness. So you keep doing that. And it's the same with the people that you love and you care for. Because they are close to you, you have a lot of expectations for them, right? You want them to be a particular way because it affects you directly. But in that process, you may not be accepting them. And then it's hard for you to then find forgiveness and love for them. So again, that forgiveness practice allows you to forgive the easier stuff as you move into the more difficult stuff. Okay, so forgiveness practice is so beautiful as a day-to-day practice, but also as a meditation. So if you want to try that forgiveness meditation, then in your meditation itself, you can bring to mind, first of all, you well up that feeling of forgiveness and love and kindness. You bring to mind the person and you offer them the forgiveness. You offer them, you can even say in your mind those words, I forgive you. I forgive you. Or if you want to seek forgiveness from other people, you can also say that I seek forgiveness from you, right? So you're offering forgiveness and also you're receiving forgiveness. Another exercise that I do with people, sometimes in groups as well, if you're more of a visual person or an action person as opposed to just sitting in meditation, is you get a chair and you kneel in front of the chair and you just imagine the person that you're seeking forgiveness from to sit on that chair, right? So this works really well with kids and family and their parents, for example, or vice versa. So just say, I want to seek forgiveness from my mum, for example. I will then imagine my mum sitting on that chair and I'll kneel in front of her and I will ask for forgiveness. And I will say all the things that I wish I could say to her. And then I imagine that she is offering her forgiveness to me. So she forgives me. I've done this in groups and there have been a lot of beautiful tears that come from it, right? It's really powerful as a practice because you're actualizing that forgiveness. It's not just a thought, it's actually something that is actualized. And then a lot of them, they go on to use this as a way for them to heal and to then physically see that person and say those words. And it's just incredible what can be done with it. But this practice also works if, say, the person has passed away and you can't actually say it to them. So you could also visualize it, or you can have that exercise on the chair. The second part of the exercise is you sit on the chair and you imagine the people who have wronged you asking for forgiveness and you offering that forgiveness. Because sometimes we feel like they haven't asked for forgiveness, I can't forgive them, right? And you hold on to that grudge because you feel like you need to so that you were right. But using this exercise, you realize actually forgiving them is actually a release for myself. So it's actually to help me. So anyway, there's some brief tips for forgiveness. I hope that helps. And if anyone else has any comments or questions, just pop it into the chat. But forgiveness practice is so beautiful. It becomes a clearing for loving kindness practice, mindfulness practice, because all those thoughts don't get stuck in you because you're now Teflon. Okay. All right. Next one is from John. Thanks, Tina, for further explanation of the Brahma Vihara meditation as a tool in meditation. Very powerful to bring peace, well-being, and serene in the mind and body. Absolutely. Ditto, John. And if anyone is interested to learn more about the forgiveness meditation and the Brahma Vihara meditation, you can look up Venerable Vimralamsi. So I've just popped his name into the chat. So I sat a retreat with him and Zen did as well. Maybe Zen would like to pop on. And we sat a retreat with him and it was just such a powerful retreat, just having forgiveness meditation, but having the Brahma Viharas as the object of meditation. We don't usually see that, and just really deepens our practice so much. And then from there, if you want to do Vipassana or other meditations, it just does that clearing for you. Okay, so anyway, you can look him up. Okay, next one. Okay, I'm just going to move. Zen says, David, your view on karma being inoperative when one is present and filled with love, joy, peace, and equanimity is interesting because this reminds me of a quote from the Buddha in the Samyutta Nikaya Connected Discourse. And Zen's given a quote. Maybe Zen, would you like to pop on and share? Wherever you may be. Oh, there he is.
Oh, hi. Yeah, so I just wanted to reaffirm what David said, because it's what the Buddha taught as well. So one can purify one's mind and past karma by developing love, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So essentially the Brahma Viharas. So you're not a victim of your past. You can change, you know? So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Zen.
Mm.
So I hope this encourages everyone to practice the 4 immeasurables, the Brahma Viharas. It is so central to my life and my practice, I have to say, like my legal practice even, like in my work with my clients. So it's very, very practical. Thank you. So David says, beautiful quote, Zen. That's my view exactly. Well done. Thank you. Kainan, there's a beautiful forgiveness meditation. Kainan, can I invite you to share about this?
Sure. Yeah, I just thanks Tina so much for talking about forgiveness practice. I think it's a really beautiful practice and can be really powerful for all the reasons you said of clearing things out. I guess my experience is I've done some of these forgiveness practices using some of the following phrases in meditation and found it to be incredibly helpful, and to work with the sort of conditioning and the conflicts in the mind, and allow these phrases to just sit and drop into that space. And I just wanted to share. So yeah, thanks everyone for that and for the discussion.
Thank you so much. I love that. I love all of those phrases, and I can see that that's very helpful, and also the link too. So such a wonderful sharing tonight. So I think with 2 minutes left.
You want to remind everyone about the WhatsApp chat group. So maybe I can put some of this link in that chat group as well.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. So some of you may have heard earlier, and those who were here last week when this beautiful idea came to fruition from our discussions, we have a WhatsApp group, and you're all invited to be a part of it. And the whole point of the WhatsApp group is some of the discussions that we've had here, this kind of sharing, this safe space for all of us to just be friends with each other. I invite you all to continue these discussions on our WhatsApp group. So if you would like to be part of that WhatsApp group, all you need to do is send Meredith a message on the chat with your phone number and your name, and then she'll be able to collate that and add you to our WhatsApp group. And some of these things can be included in there. If you've got any friends, you're welcome to also invite them to join as well. And it's just a really nice space for us to share ideas, share the Dhamma, and share our lives together. Oh, okay, cool.
So I'm happy with anyone to listen to what I've got to ask. You know how I had this thing with justice, and Tina, you said just think about karma. Karma would do that, but if you actually remove karma from the equation, do you just accept injustice and say that's what life is, and that's how you look at the whole thing, and let go of that? Is that how you do it? Sorry, I'm very new to this, so I'm kind of trying to grasp quite a few of things which you just said, because you said karma was a big thing for you. You said, okay, that's not karma. Yeah. But then David's saying he doesn't believe in karma. So my question is then, if you remove karma from the equation, do you just accept that's what life is?
Well, that's David's question, really. How do you deal with injustice, David, if you don't believe in karma?
Yeah, just briefly, Daisy. The experience of being fully present includes being fully present to the thoughts and feelings which are occurring in the moment, which would include if somebody's behaving in a very nasty, expressing injustice, that there would be a very deep rising up of protest and an effective way of responding without creating a certain sort of identity around it. It would just be almost like a natural response, which would be to limit the whatever is happening in the moment, and to recognize and to validate that as a natural response occurring in the moment. So very much so, not just letting things be. No, that's just a sort of neo-Buddhist type of understanding, which is, I think, quite harmful.
Yeah, and also when even understanding karma, it's not, oh, I'm just going to leave it up to karma and I'm going to do nothing, right? So no, that's not an understanding of karma. So karma, actually, it involves action, right? So that kind of intentional action, that's karma. So the intentional actions that we bring forward. So that's really what it's about. So in terms of injustice, for me, why it's helpful is because when things appear to not make sense, if you look at it from a longer perspective, it does. And you don't even have to think about past life karma or anything like that. Like even in this life, I have seen how people relate to each other in their relationship actually affects them ongoing, right? So that's actually karma, just seeing the cause and effect of things as they go along. Yeah.
Thank you. And it was more the basic thing when you see, like, let's say you see corruption, someone stealing money or taking things, and you are the only one who is sort of kicking up a big fuss, and everyone's like corrupt within the committee.
Yeah.
Do you then just say, let go of it? I find it really hard because I feel that there's a sense of justice that you should speak out and all of that. But if you speak out and you're ridiculed, then you just kind of let it go. And I find it really hard because I actually lose sleep because of that, which is a bit silly, but I just find it's just not right. But maybe I should just, I mean, like what you say, just accept that there are a lot of injustices in the world and just let it go, kind of thing. Is that right? Is that how you deal with it? No?
Well, no, like what I was saying earlier, as in the legal system, we still do everything we can to make people's lives better and to have that sense of justice, right?
Yes.
So I don't just sit there and go, oh, well, I'm just going to do nothing. Right? I still, on a day-to-day basis, try to make positive change in people's lives. But there are some things that will go beyond our limited knowledge and information that we've got, right? And so that's where I do believe in karma. And another thing as well is, and this is something that the Buddha talked about, right? Having a blameless life is so freeing, right? Some people don't realize. So you may think, oh, look, they have all this corruption, they're taking so much money and they're getting away with it. They're not getting away with it, Daisy. I can tell you that. I can guarantee you that. They are not getting away with it because the qualities that they are developing within themselves is qualities of greed, qualities of delusion, qualities of wanting an advantage over another person. And that causes a lot of suffering. There's also qualities of fear, right? Never really knowing when they will be caught, right? Always looking over their shoulder, never being at peace, never being at ease. You, on the other hand, Daisy, you may be up all night thinking about this. However, you don't have any fear that someone's going to be coming knocking on your door because someone has called the police on you, right? So that's where karma actually is instantaneous. You don't need to wait for a long time for something to happen. So hence why in our practice, we do have wholesome conduct, unwholesome conduct, skillful conduct, unskillful conduct for these reasons. Even if no one knows what we've done, we know. And within ourselves, there is that unease. That is the suffering.
Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Always so wise.
Yeah, and I think also like, I think it's an opportunity to look upon ourselves as well, Daisy. It's like when you see something like that happen, there's so much suffering in you that you inflict on yourself. If you look at it, it's like even two different persons, when they look at the same thing, their perspective of that same thing is different. So their level of suffering is different. So why is that if let's say everything should be the same, so we both should suffer the same way, but it's not. So when it's not, it's your perspective and other people's perspective is different. So therefore, I think we should look at why are we feeling this way? What triggers us to have so much more suffering than the others? I think that will come to the ego perspective. I think this is another topic.
Yeah, okay. No, thank you. A lot of food for thought. And every time you all say something, there's like open a can of worms somewhere. Like it's like, you know, like every time it's so.
Daisy, don't forget the WhatsApp group is designed so that we can continue the conversations as well. So feel free to jump in there too if you want to.
Thank you. So sorry about that. Thank you, guys. That was
all good. Don't be sorry, and come back next week if you've got more questions.
Yeah.
Thank you. So good. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Have a great week. And that's all from me. Over to you, David and Meredith.
David, do you have any things to say before we end the session?
I just want to say how much I appreciate Tina and everybody and Meredith. This wonderful group, just to affirm that this WhatsApp group has a way of sort of joining the dots. It really is a very holding forum for us to share and to continue learning. So yeah, I agree, Tina. It's been wonderful tonight. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Tina and David. So forever grateful for your unconditional contributions to these sessions. I believe that many of us have benefited from your teaching and your sharing. Yeah. And even just any one of you can just bring back a little bit of peacefulness in your mind tonight, even if it is not a big enlightenment process or something. And that little spark in your mind, I believe that it will grow from there, and that will give you some peacefulness. And then we thank you for your participations in these sessions. And don't forget, next week we have our last week of this series, and that is to free yourself from the past. It's very exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next week.
Stay safe.
Thank you.